This is the final episode in our season covering cases in Georgia, Illinois, and Montana. This episode contains discussion of substance use, violence, crime scenes, and homicide. Listener discretion is advised. This is The Fall Line. In May of 2023, we released 2 episodes covering Matthew Rattlesnake Grant, who was murdered on the Blackfeet Reservation in December of 2016. His aunt, Rhonda Grant Connolly, has since spent incredible time and effort organizing events for MMIP, Missing and Murdered Indigenous People, for the Blackfeet Nation. She and other women have worked to develop an organization, Blackfeet MMIP Community Center, to offer services for families in their area. Rhonda's work introduced us to Ann Marceau, whose husband, Jamie Ray TakesGun, was murdered in October of 2022. He just turned 47 years old that September, and they shared 3 adult children, 2 sons and a daughter. They'd been together for more than 25 years, a lifetime, and lived all over Montana. But they'd returned to Great Falls after the birth of their youngest child. Anne needed to be near her family for support. Great Falls is about 2 hours south of Star School in Browning, near where much of Jamie's family resides. You may recall those towns are within the bounds of the Blackfeet Reservation. Jamie had been many things over the years. A firefighter, a horse wrangler, a carpenter, fence mender, a mechanic. He knew how to do so many things. But first and foremost, he was loved. That's what Anne wants you to know about her husband. Jamie's death, like the death of Princella Epps, was little remarked on in the media. According to KRTV, a local station in Great Falls, Jamie's murder was first reported as a, quote, suspicious death that happened on Sunday, October 30th, 2022. At about 3:47 a.m., officers responded to a disturbance inside a residence on the 600 block of 5th Avenue Northwest. They discovered the body of a man in his 40s, end quote. At that time, Jamie's identity had not yet been released. KRTV reported at the time that, quote, several people have been interviewed regarding the incident, and at this point, the death is considered suspicious, according to the GFPD. To our knowledge, that is the extent of the coverage regarding Jamie TakesGun. He was found beaten to death in the back bedroom of an apartment in a complex where his own family had lived years before. He'd been at a party that night, and found that out later. It was one of 2 apartments in the complex where people could go to drink, she said, at pretty much any time of the day. Jamie was well known to a number of the people who lived and hung out there, and he would have felt comfortable around them. Anne did not want him spending time there, but she didn't always know exactly where he'd go when he left the house. Jamie's substance abuse disorder, it had grown more severe over the years, but he always checked in with the family. And when he didn't that weekend, she grew worried. Anne spent that entire weekend looking for him. When she went to file a missing persons report, she discovered that he'd been found deceased. This is not the first time that we've told a story like Anne's. A family frantically searching, only to discover that their loved one had already been found dead. She has been struggling to get more information ever since. It's been 2 years, and she worries that Jamie's case has not progressed much further than it had in the fall of 2022. There were plenty of people in attendance at that party in October. We cannot give an exact number. We were denied FOIA in the case, but Anne thinks there were plenty of witnesses who could tell authorities exactly what happened to Jamie, on the record, and resolve his case. Unlike Princella Epps' death or Roger Aguirre's disappearance, Jamie's case is barely 2 years old. Anne tells us that nearly everyone who was there that night is still alive and in the Great Falls area. Some are even currently in jail or prison. She says that it's just a matter of seeing the case through. But Anne says she isn't sure that that's going to happen. We spoke with Anne late this summer. She began by telling us about Jamie's early life, where he grew up, and a little about his childhood.
Jamie's from the Star School area, about maybe 7-8 miles west of Browning. Well, I know he has like 4 biological siblings. There was a few, I think maybe 2 or 3 adopted siblings he had. From what he told me is that his mom and dad split when they were very young. He's a descendant of the Blackfeet Nation, but he's an enrolled member of the Yakama Nation from Washington, and that's where his mom's from, is Washington. So when his mom and dad split, he didn't give me a year when that happened, but the kids ended up going with their mom over to Washington for a while, and that's where he was. It sounds like he went back and forth between Washington and his dad's house in Star School. They played outside a lot, and where his dad's house is located, it's right next to the river. So they have horses. He talked about going horseback riding. There's like little mountains there. Did a lot of hunting. They did a lot of beaver trapping.
And did he continue doing that as an adult?
I believe so, all the way up until he hit high school, and then that's when he started playing more sports, like basketball, track. He spent maybe 2 years in Browning of his high school years, and then ended up going back to his mom. And I think he was in Yakima or Toppenish, Washington, where he got his GED. We met in Browning. I met him through one of my friends.
Anne and Jamie were very young when they met, young and having fun, and going to parties. But when Anne discovered she was pregnant with their first child, James, she said that they had to figure things out quickly. She was only 19, and they didn't have much. She recalled being in the last weeks of her pregnancy and feeling absolutely miserable, and excited and ready for the baby to come, but also at the upper limits of what her body could take. Jamie, he was trying everything he could to help her feel better and to encourage her labor to begin. But their son, James, he was not making his expected appearance.
I'm a small person. I'm only like 5'3" and 125 pounds. So when I became pregnant with our firstborn, I went from 124 to 194. I was big. And then James, from him being so big, he was stubborn. Mm-hmm. So we had this one Ford truck that if we went past 40 miles in it, it would shake like crazy. It was very uncomfortable.
When James finally arrived, Jamie was ecstatic. He loved being a father. They were figuring it out as they went along, like most of us do.
Had a lot of crazy moments, especially changing diapers. I remember one time he was so excited to play with James, but I just got done feeding James, and I kept telling him not to be tossing him up and catching him, but he didn't listen, and James ended up puking all over him. Jamie was all dressed up and nice looking, and yeah, our baby puked all over him.
Anne says that Jamie had a lot of different skills, which meant that he could pick up work doing just about anything. That was lucky, because Browning did not offer much. He might do mechanic work one week and repair fences the next.
See, when we first had James, Jamie was doing like side work. Since we lived in Browning and there ain't much job opportunities, he would get wood, and we'd go sell wood together as a family. He was doing the beaver trapping and selling the hides for us. He was breaking horses. He used to go and if people had their horses out in big pastures, he would go and gather them. He would shoe horses. I got to watch that right there. Gathering the horses to shoe them, that was scary because we would have to stand in front of them waving our arms and try to be big to get them to go in the right direction. But then you have like 6 or 8 big horses running at you.
Jamie TakesGun also spent a significant amount of time working as a firefighter in Browning, Montana. We found an article from 2000 that mentioned him leading one of the crews that spent entire wildfire seasons up in the mountains. Anne told us that for a time, he was part of a crew that could be called up to go anywhere in the United States. She even recalled a time when he and other firefighters were called to East Texas to search for debris from the Space Shuttle Columbia. According to the Las Vegas Sun, more than 4,000 firefighters from across the country joined in that effort.
It was through Browning at the Blackfeet Fire Cache. From him being a firefighter, a wildland firefighter, and they just went through their crew list and start calling people who was willing to leave right then and there. It was like an hour notice if they wanted that job or not.
In those early years, Jamie often had to take work that kept him away from home for long stretches of time. By the early 2000s, they had 2 children, their boys. They moved from Browning to Cutbank, and there, Jamie took a job with the oil rigs.
So there was times to where he would be on the work site for 2 weeks, and then he would come home for maybe 2 to 4 days, and then he would be gone again for another 2 weeks. It was horrible, especially having 2 young kids, and the nights were bad.
How old were they at this time?
They were 2 and 3.
Oh,
I had them in Head Start, and the Head Start teachers, they didn't even know they had a dad. They thought Jamie was just my boyfriend until I start making him come into the Head Start more with me. Heck, that went on till a very long time. He didn't quit the oil rigs until I decided to move to Great Falls.
Anne didn't make that choice lightly. Jamie would have preferred to stay in the Browning area, but Anne's family is in Great Falls, and after the birth of their 3rd child, she said that she needed the help. She'd had a difficult time with birth recovery, and she wanted to be close.
I lived with them for about maybe 6 months, and then I ended up getting my own apartment down here in Great Falls, which is ironic because the first apartments I got here in Great Falls that I lived in for 7 months, and that Jamie wasn't allowed to live with me because he couldn't pass a background check. I mean, when I did my application, I had to do a Montana one, I had to do a county one, I had to do a tribal one. And since me and him lived in Toppenish for like 6 months within the last 4 years, I had to do a Washington one. So they pretty much ran everything, drugs, alcohol. Only thing that wasn't counted against us was minor traffic. By the time I met him, he already had felony charges from, I believe, drugs and alcohol. I believe it started when he was a minor, it sounds like. I went ahead and I got the landlady to okay it, to let him be there during the daytime to babysit the kids while I was at work. Oh gosh, he was wonderful with his daughter. I mean, he let her paint his nails. I remember one time he forgot that he let her put those sticky earrings on him, and he ended up going to work with them on. He would play dress up with her. He would let her do makeup.
he sounds like a very playful dad.
And then when he did her hair, it was always crooked, but she loved it. She didn't care.
Anne says that Jamie had always had some issues with substance use. He was a loving father, but he also had legal troubles throughout his life that worsened when they moved to Great Falls.
It was crazy because he did not straighten up. It seems like once we moved out of Cutbank and we got down here and the kids start getting a little older and didn't depend on him so much, that was when he kind of started drinking more. And that's when he started getting into trouble more again. When I lived in his apartment complex, he was in trouble for a lot of things. He ended up going to watch, which was 6 months. He was in jail for, I think, 6 weeks for a car accident since he was driving.
When Anne mentions watch, she's referring to Warm Springs Addiction, Treatment, and Change Program. Per the official website, quote, Watch serves male 4th and subsequent DUI offenders and has a capacity of 115 individuals. This program is a cost-effective sentencing alternative that allows individuals to receive treatment in lieu of extended stays in jail or prison.
From him getting into trouble so much, he lost quite a few jobs. There's times to where he would tell me that he was going to go borrow a cigarette from like one of his friends, and then he wouldn't come back for like either a day, a night, 2 days, 2 nights. Sometimes he would call me 2 days later and tell me he's in jail. Or he'll call me the next day and say, oh, I'm in Browning at my dad's house. And it got to the point to where I ended up having to tell his probation officer what was going on.
So you were hoping that he would feel like he had a reason to step away from the drugs and alcohol?
Right. Because when I decided to move to Great Falls, and I told him that I was moving to Great Falls, he asked me not to move to a big city because he was afraid of the trouble he was going to get into. But my response was, he's an adult and he needs to learn his consequences for his own actions, I guess.
And you needed help.
Right. That's why I decided to move to Great Falls. I wanted my kids to have a better opportunity than what was just in Cupbank and Browning, because there's like literally nothing up there. And things went good those first 2 years. And then everything just went bad to where Jamie was constantly in trouble. And I don't mean him being in jail like one night. He was in jail for like multiple nights, weeks. That kinds of trouble he was getting into. You know, at first for a while there, it was just me telling him to behave, to straighten up, to stop drinking. And in the end, because I've been telling him that for so long, I mean, I didn't feel like I only had 3 kids. I felt like I had 4, and he was the oldest. But in the end, not just was I telling him to straighten up and behave, all 3 of our kids was telling him to straighten up and behave. Because we all watch, it's sad when you watch them decline like that. And I was told from multiple organizations that I speak with now that Jamie did reach out for help. But unfortunately, Jamie didn't make it to his appointments, because I'm assuming that when he was walking to his appointments, he must have ran into this group that killed him, because the group that killed him hangs out on the streets of Great Falls.
Anne says Jamie habitually drank with a large, loosely associated group of people, some of whom he had strong ties to. They hung out on the streets of Great Falls and would often have parties at those 2 apartments we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. Since Jamie often traveled on foot or he borrowed his oldest son's bicycle, Anne told us that he was likely to bump into any one of them if he traveled through the city.
3 different people told me that he reached out to them. And they said that when they would call him, it would take him multiple calls to get him to answer the phone. But when he would answer the phone, he would agree to come over. And once again, he wouldn't show up. There was times to where I would be looking for him because he never came home. And that's where he would be. He would be sitting alongside the church over here. And I would pick him up and make him come home. But the next day, as soon as I go to work, that's where he would go right back to, is that same place in that same group. And when I kept telling him to quit hanging out with them, that's all he kept telling me was that I shouldn't have to worry about him because he has a safe place to go when he wants to drink. But unfortunately, when Jamie was found in their apartment, they denied even knowing him.
That wasn't possible, according to Anne. Not only did a number of people who hung out or lived at the apartments know Jamie, some had connections to his family. Some had known him for decades. That was his pattern for a long time. He would be gone for a little while, then be in contact with Anne, or his father, or his children. Anne told us that if he didn't call, they'd go looking for him to make sure that he was all right. That's exactly what happened the weekend before Halloween in 2022.
Well, he left our house on October 28th, which would have been a Saturday night. Last time we seen him was in the time frame of 9 at night at 9:30. And he never came home that night. Next morning, he wasn't back. I ended up going to work. At my lunch hour, I come home, and me and my youngest, we drove around. We went looking at the usual spots we would find him, which was down here by that homeless camp, and nothing. So I went back to work, got off of work. And since I didn't get off at 5 and it was already dark, I looked around for maybe another hour or 2, and I just got frustrated. I knew he was on my oldest son's bike, and that bike is a fluorescent green that sticks out day and night, and that's what I was looking for. But Sunday, Monday, never found him. Tuesday morning, which is November 1st now, I never heard from him. I never seen him, which is very unusual because usually this was a pattern behavior of his. And when he did this, he usually either called me the next day or he would come and see me the next day. If he didn't get a hold of me, he would get a hold of one of our kids.
Anne had long known about the people that Jamie spent time with, but she didn't know exactly where they lived. Not then. She found out more when she spoke with Jamie's father.
Tuesday morning, his dad finally answered his phone, and I asked for Jamie, and that's when his dad told me that he hasn't seen Jamie for 3 weeks now since Jamie came home to us in Great Falls again. That's when his dad told me that as soon as I could to go down to that police station here. And just out of the blue, not knowing nothing, I just happened to mention his name, and I asked his dad where she lived. He's the one that told me where the apartment was and where to go look. So that was the first thing I did when I went on lunch. I drove by those apartments and I see nothing. I figured if I could see that bike, Jamie's going to be there. Because he knew that was our son's bike and he knew that wasn't his. So I knew he wouldn't wander off from that bike. So I went home, I ate a sandwich, sat there for a little bit. I questioned the kids again and I told them what my plan was. And I really hesitated to go into the police department because I was in trouble myself at the time. I had traffic warrants on me. And I almost went back to work, but something told me to go back. Something told me to go into that police department. So I did. I had Jamie's ID with me. I had his discovery paper from the public defender because Jamie was in trouble at the time. And within 3 minutes of me standing there, giving them his ID and his public defender paper and just saying, I want to do a missing persons report on my husband. 3 minutes later, a little typing on the computer, the guy at the window says, oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am. He goes, I hate to inform you like this. He goes, but Jamie is deceased. And I'm like, no, he can't be. And I pushed his papers forward and said, please start my missing persons report. And he's like, no, ma'am, I'm sorry. He said the information is correct. And then I went to turn around because I was going to leave. And he says, ma'am, he says, you can't leave because you got investigators that want to talk to you. And all I could do is stand there and cry. Tony was the first person I called. And she's like, I'm sorry, Mom. I can't come there and be with you because I'm going to my doctor's appointment. But within 2 minutes, James showed up because he ran down there. Tony told James when she was on the phone with me. And then they called my sisters. My sisters came. My mom lives in Lewistown and she kept calling my phone and all I could say is, Mom, I can't talk to you right now. But my mom was here in Great Falls in like 45 minutes. It's strange because these people that did this to Jamie, they know his family in Browning, but no one could tell his family up there. We would have known, 2.5 days earlier. But by the time we found out, they already had his autopsy scheduled. He was all over the news, of course, with no name, though. I still get no answer of why the coroner never notified us. The coroner that I did speak to a month later after things happened with Jamie, he told me that the reason why I wasn't notified is because I ain't Jamie's family, since we're not legally married and I'm his common law wife. Which was still strange because next to kin lives with me. And next to kin was with me looking for his dad. Next to kin was with me at the police department. They never notified next to kin.
Do you know how they eventually found out his identity?
You know, they never told me how Jamie was identified. We never identified him. I'm assuming because he was just out of jail like 2 to 3 weeks prior to this happening to him. That's why I didn't understand why we weren't notified, because all his information is up to date and right there.
That lack of communication with Anne and with Jamie's children, she feels like it was the beginning of a pattern, and it's one she has not been able to break. Anne says that she's not able to remember the next few weeks with much clarity. They called relatives and they made plans for Jamie's final arrangements.
Oh gosh, my kids James and Tony pretty much handled all of that. I mean, I was with them physically, I guess. My sister and my brother-in-law stepped in at that time too and helped out a lot. They took us everywhere we needed. Um, I think I didn't drive that that first month of him being gone. I didn't drive myself nowhere. My sister and them drove me everywhere. They helped us with all the arrangements and things.
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing everything wrong. I was calling in on my days off. I was requesting my days off because I just had everything all messed up and, I wasn't there. Yeah. It was like my world was just flipped upside down overnight. I mean, every day felt strange. Everything felt strange. I felt like I was back in high school again because I just spent my entire adult life with Jamie. I spent 26 years with him. I met him when I was 19, just turning 20 was when I met Jamie. So yeah, Jamie basically was my whole adult life. I work at Walmart here and I have like a lot of usual customers because I've been there for 2 years and they watched me have meltdowns because I didn't know what to do. Right. And that's what I told my mom. That's what I told her how could you grieve peacefully when you're dealing with a murder investigation? It's like every time they call, it's just that Band-Aid ripped right off that wound again. Another wide open wound. It just keeps opening. The more they call, the more they tell me things. It's like the more it opened up. They asked me when was the last time I seen Jamie. They were asking how Jamie knew this place. I can't really remember some of those questions there because I was the one sitting there I was asking about where that the bike went.
Did you ever find out where it was?
Yeah, the leaseholder of that apartment pawned it.
Did you get it back?
Oh, about 6 to 8 months later, they called us and asked if we wanted it back. And since it was James's bike, I let James decide. And me and James decided that was bad memories and we didn't want the bike back.
As some details of the case began to emerge, it became clear to Anne that Jamie had likely been moved between the two apartments that night. They were rented out by two separate members of the crowd that Jamie hung out with and used as a sort of communal party space, with people coming and going from one to the other as they wished. According to police, Jamie had been found deceased in the back bedroom of one of the apartments. Anne says, though, that evidence points to him having been assaulted in a number of those rooms.
Jamie's case is really difficult because there's two apartments involved in this. So the two apartments, they were providing shelter for the homeless people down here if they wanted to drink or be warm and stuff like that. These apartments are set up to where you could just open your front doors and you could see right into the living room of each other's apartment. So basically that's what they did. They just opened up the doors and had one big party going.
Do you know what the conflict was about that would have led to this happening?
From what the street rumors say, is that this group asked Jamie to do a beer run, and Jamie wouldn't do it. So he was trying to leave when the fight broke out. From what the investigator tells me, is that they said that they threw Jamie out of the party, and Jamie didn't leave quietly. He went back banging and kicking on the door. So they pulled him in and started beating him up. So when you enter these apartments, like how I was telling you, where you could just open up your front doors and you'll be able to see each other's living room. Well, there's one main door that leads you to this apartment. And that's where the first beating happened, was right there at that entrance. He was banging and beating on the front door. So they opened up the front door, yanked him in, most likely, and beat him right there. But somehow, Jamie ended up into one of the back bedrooms. So here's his second beating, and this is where forensic evidence was found with blood splatters on the walls. But the blood splatters weren't up high; they were down low, like he was already down on the ground. And then the third beating happened in the final last room where he was found. Once again, forensic evidence was found in that room with blood splatters being on the ground and down low. Jamie was found with no shoes on. Jamie has a missing sweater, which I haven't got an answer for yet. The investigator told me that Jamie's belt loops were brought up, and so was Jamie's belt. He asked me to explain what his pants look like, especially the belt loops. They were regular blue jeans, no stains on them. I said his belt and his belt loops were perfectly fine because I'm the one that bought them. It sounds like that's what they used to bring him from. It sounds like he come to at least once, and I think that's how he ended up into the third room, is that he come to in the second room and must have tried to leave. And they either discovered he was trying to leave or found him, start beating up on him again, drug him into that third room, beat him up some more, and that's where they left him. I was told that Jamie could have survived this if they didn't throw him in the back room and let him lay there for so long. Like I said, I lived in these apartments. I know how they're set up. I would be able to hear everything in these apartments. So I don't know how these people got away with saying that nothing was heard.
According to what Anne's been told, the people who were living in the apartments moved out or were removed soon after Jamie's death. One of the main party participants passed away soon after Jamie died. Anne's able to confirm that because the person is well known to her husband's family. But there are many others who are still alive today, and they're living in Great Falls. She thinks that they know what happened. They just don't want to talk, either because they participated or because they're frightened.
It sounds like the people that know things are more scared of one of the suspects. Only one suspect names that keeps coming up of people being scared of.
Soon after Jamie's death, Anne says the family submitted their own FOIA request for information on the case. She told us the request was denied due to open investigation, but it's a step that she took because she was having difficulty advocating on Jamie's behalf.
One of the biggest roadblocks I ran into was them using common law marriage against me. Although Montana does recognize common law marriage, the tribes don't. That's how come James was coming with me everywhere I went when I was out trying to find answers. Whenever I made phone calls, James made sure he sat by me. And if it wasn't James, then Tony did. One of my kids always made sure they were with me when I was calling around or went to go get answers in case they threw that card at me. That's not a good feeling, having your spouse murdered like that and then just being told that he was brutally beat to death. And then that's it. How everybody was let go. How no one was held accountable for any of this. And with all of this stuff, with Jamie being in drug court twice, I had the feeling of his case being profiled, not only racially, but image-wise. You know what I mean? His background and stuff. And then I start noticing none of my phone calls were being answered. So I felt like I was being labeled as being pesty. And one day I was sitting here thinking about things, and I thought, I don't have to bug these guys like this. They know I'm here. They know I'm waiting. So that's when I finally realized to myself that I needed to take a break. I needed to step away for a little bit. For a while there, I called like 2 or 3 days out of the week. Right after things happened, I knew that there was stuff wrong with Jamie's case. I knew we were going to have problems. I started calling attorneys then. I was shut down by every one of them because they told me that me not knowing any information, they couldn't help me, for me to call back when I got more information. Well, it took them 18 months to give me information. Now that I got more information, I'm still being told no help. It's either too complex or they just don't even have a reason. They just refer me to another person, and then that person just says, nope, sorry, we don't want to handle your case. And then they just keep referring me to someone else.
Do they ever say it's because the case is still open, or they just say it's too complicated?
Yeah, that's all I hear is it's too complicated. I don't think my children like to speak about it much because they see the mental turmoil it puts me into. And then they see how long it kind of takes me to dig my way out, I guess. Those were the words that my oldest son used one day when me and him was talking.
Anne tells us that she has had some communication that feels productive, mostly with the detective who is directly assigned to Jamie's case. What she has not been able to get answers to, though, are her questions regarding suspects. She's worried that his case is not a priority for those who make the decisions about charges being pursued. We did reach out to the Great Falls Police Department for a statement regarding the current status of Jamie's case, but at the time of this recording, we have not received a reply. Anne tells us that the primary investigator has encouraged her to advocate for Jamie's case, so Anne scheduled a meeting with a city official that she hopes can help. She was awaiting that meeting at the time of this recording.
I don't think this falls with the investigator. I think I have a good investigator. Jamie has a good investigator. It took me 8 months to finally decide to make this meeting because I didn't think I was ready. I mean, I still don't think I'm ready, but it's something I got to do. I talked to a lot of people. I thought I had to be very professional and stuff. So I was kind of waiting to be able to speak without crying. But everybody tells me that there's no way you can't be unemotional with this. I mean, what happened to Jamie is just very uncalled for. It's not right. So one lady told me not to hold my emotions back. If I'm going to cry, for me to sit there and cry. And like one lady told me, she goes, your husband may have been an alcoholic. She goes, but that's okay. She goes, because you know what? He was your person. She told me not to stop fighting, for me to make my voice louder and stronger.
Anne has the support of other MMIP activists in Montana, like Rhonda Grant Connolly, but she also needs more coverage for Jamie's case, and she needs actionable tips for the Great Falls law enforcement, and that is where you can help most. Please share this episode and the social media posts that we've made. And if you have any information regarding the murder of Jamie Ray TakesGun, please call Great Falls Crime Stoppers at 406-727-TIPS. Tipsters can be eligible for up to a $1,000 cash reward. The Fall Line will be back in January for our mid-season feature episode and for our next full season in February. Be sure to join us then. If you know of a case that should be covered on the Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to check your subscriptions to make sure that you're set up for automatic downloads so that you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, which covers years of my life working on a Jane Doe case in the world of forensic scientists who resolve unidentified persons cases, is out everywhere now as a hardcover, ebook, and audiobook, read by me. You can order it anywhere you get books and through your local library. Find out more through the link in our show notes. And if you'd like to support the show and the stories we cover, join us on Patreon or Apple Premium. 100% of our Patreon and Apple Premium earnings are supporting our Family Therapy Fund and actively paying for therapy for families who've appeared on the show. On Patreon, you can get early release ad-free versions of our regular episodes for $5 a month. If you prefer Apple Premium, you can subscribe there as well. On Patreon, we also post occasional giveaways, updates, and blogs, which all patrons can enjoy, starting at just $1. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laurah Norton, with additional research assistance this season by Melissa Gold. Interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Produced, engineered, and scored by Maura Curry. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy and Brandy C. Williams. Special thanks to Liz Lipka.